J.D. Vance just asked Gavin Newsom one singular, devastating question on live national television. And for a suspended, agonizing eternity, the man who desperately intends to be the next president of the United States could not summon a single word in response. The question hovering in the heavy studio air was not about a salacious scandal, nor was it a convoluted inquiry into political corruption, nor was it anything remotely resembling the predictable partisan attacks he and his sprawling team of consultants had meticulously prepared for over months of mock debates. It was a question of brutal, elementary arithmetic. $37 billion allocated for the crisis of homelessness, divided by 187,000 human beings living on the streets of California. That calculation yields precisely $197,000 per person. It is an astronomical sum, a figure substantial enough to purchase a median-priced home outright in 40 different American states. The inquiry was delivered with surgical precision, hanging in the silence of the auditorium. Where did the money go, Governor? $37 billion spent, yet homelessness in the Golden State exploded by an astonishing 44%. The crushing reality was not just that Gavin Newsom did not know where the money went, it was the terrifying realization that he didn't know because he had never bothered to track it. He was not maliciously hiding the funds in a clandestine offshore account. He had simply orchestrated an administration that never implemented a ledger. His very own state auditor, a nonpartisan official operating within his own governmental apparatus, had explicitly stated on the public record that there had been absolutely no tracking of spending, no monitoring of outcomes, and no evaluation of program efficacy since the year 2021. $37 billion injected into the bureaucratic ether with zero tracking and zero verifiable results. And when a proactive state legislator actually drafted and passed a bipartisan bill forcing the governor's administration to transparently show where this colossal mountain of taxpayer money had vanished, Gavin Newsom arrogantly vetoed it. Gavin Newsom was not ambushed or destroyed by a right-wing conspiracy. He was dismantled by his own signature. He spent $37 billion. He never counted it. He never looked for it. And then he deliberately struck down the one person who legally attempted to make him look. And tonight, beneath the glaring, unforgiving lights of 14 high-definition cameras and in front of an audience of 9 million captivated American viewers, J.D. Vance simply opened a laptop and did the counting for him. It was the genesis of a political narrative that would define an era. Everything Gavin Newsom touches simply vanishes. The money vanishes, the houses vanish, the grand political promises vanish into the coastal fog. The only thing that stubbornly refuses to vanish are the 187,000 broken people sleeping on the concrete, and the unspoken, yet universally understood, terrifying implication was clear. This man wants to take this exact model of governance and apply it to the entire country. To understand the sheer magnitude of the collapse, one must rewind to when the town hall was a mere 11 minutes old, a brief window during which Gavin Newsom was objectively, flawlessly winning. He had delivered his opening remarks exactly the way he delivered everything in his charmed public life. Standing tall, utilizing the entire stage, gesturing with practiced sweeping hand movements, and filling the cavernous room with the particular undeniable energy of a man who had spent his entire adult existence learning precisely how to make a camera lens fall deeply and irrevocably in love with him. He commanded the space for 5 uninterrupted minutes, reciting a mesmerizing monologue about California's gross domestic product being the 5th largest in the world, painting his state as the undisputed, roaring engine of American technology, the birthplace of the electric vehicle revolution, and the vanguard leading the most historically ambitious climate agenda on the face of the earth. In those 5 minutes, he deployed the word innovation 6 times. He invoked the future 4 times. He triumphantly declared California to be the living, breathing proof that progressive governance unequivocally works on a massive scale. And every single sentence landed with devastating effectiveness, the way his sentences always landed cleanly, confidently, and coated with the immaculate polish of a man who had never, not once in his decades-long political career, been caught without the exact right word at the exact right time. He was 58 years old, standing an imposing 6'3", radiating the manicured vitality of a Hollywood executive, and he was running for the presidency of the United States without ever officially saying he was running for the presidency. This primetime town hall was the ultimate audition. The American electorate was the captive audience, and for those initial 11 minutes, the performance was unfolding exactly as rehearsed in the war rooms of Sacramento. Then, the veteran moderator gracefully turned the floor over to J.D. Vance. What followed was 5 agonizing seconds of dead, heavy silence. Vance was not looking at the moderator. He was not looking at Newsom. He was not scanning the gallery of faces in the audience, nor was he finding the red tally light of the broadcast cameras. He was looking exclusively at the glowing screen of his laptop. His fingers rested lightly on the keyboard, adopting the exact same patient, loaded posture they had possessed during his viral town hall, dismantling of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez 3 weeks prior. He was a coiled spring of data. When he finally spoke, the voice was a flat, unadorned Ohio baritone, deliberately stripped of all performative charm or rhetorical flourish. It was the voice of a man who constructs political arguments the exact same way forensic accountants construct spreadsheets, one solid row at a time, ensuring every single row is utterly load-bearing before moving to the next. The governor is absolutely correct that California's GDP is the 5th largest in the world, Vance began, conceding the premise with disarming ease. But California also possesses the largest homeless population of any state in the American Union. 187,000 American citizens sleeping on sidewalks and in overwhelmed shelters on any given night. He is correct about that reality as well, although he noticeably declined to mention it. He looked up from the laptop, his eyes locking on to Newsom. The governor just spent 5 eloquent minutes telling you exactly what California is. I am going to spend my allotted time telling you exactly what California costs. He reached down and clicked open a new tab. Backstage, in the artificially cooled environment of the green room, Jake Ellison, Newsom's battle-hardened deputy chief of staff, sat frozen. This was the man who had meticulously managed the governor's debate prep for 2 grueling days, repeatedly instructing the surrogate team to just let Gavin be Gavin. Now, as he watched the high-definition monitor, Ellison physically felt the atmospheric temperature of the room plummet. The seasoned operative instantly recognized the catastrophe unfolding on screen. He had prepared Gavin Newsom for a traditional, rhetorical political debate, but J.D. Vance was not engaging in a debate. J.D. Vance was executing an audit. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Ellison's veins. He snatched his encrypted phone and rapidly fired off a text message to the campaign's policy director. He's not debating, he's auditing. Pull the homeless spending data right now. All of it. The response materialized 11 seconds later, and it was a digital death sentence. Which data? We have 6 different bureaucratic tracking systems, and literally none of them match. Jake Ellison stared blankly at the glowing text. 6 separate, bloated government systems, none of them matching. That terrifying reality was not an answer to the question J.D. Vance was about to ask on national television. That was, in fact, the exact question J.D. Vance was about to ask. Out on the stage, oblivious to the panic in the green room, Vance systematically read off the ledger from his screen. He was citing state auditor reports, deep dive Cal Matters investigative pieces, official California state budget documents, and unquestionable public records. Every single number he deployed was meticulously sourced. Every figure was independently verifiable. Every data point was drawn exclusively from the state of California's very own internal accounting departments. Since the year 2019, Vance stated, the cadence of his voice relentless and steady, the state of California has spent approximately $37 billion specifically on homelessness intervention programs. During that exact same period, the raw number of homeless individuals in the state actually increased from 151,000 to 187,000. That is an increase of 36,000 human beings, an increase of 24%. He audibly typed a simple calculation on the laptop's keyboard, and the massive studio monitor behind him instantly displayed the brutal arithmetic. $37 billion divided by 151,000, which was the number of homeless citizens when the governor first took office, equals approximately $245,000 spent per person. Vance, let that staggering number sit in the air for 3 long seconds. 4 seconds. Let the audience digest the sheer financial weight of it. Then, deliberately, he opened a second tab on his browser. A list of median home prices by state began to scroll down the enormous studio monitor. Ohio, $210,000. Michigan, $230,000. Texas, $240,000. Tennessee, $225,000. Vance looked directly into the primary camera. $245,000 per person. That is enough capital to literally purchase a median-priced home in 40 out of the 50 United States. The state government spent enough taxpayer money per homeless individual to simply buy each and every one of them a house outright. And instead, despite that staggering expenditure, the number of homeless people increased by 24%. Having established the macro-level systemic failure, Vance seamlessly pivoted to the microscopic human tragedy, wielding empathy not as an emotion, but as a weapon of conviction. I want to take a moment to tell you about a woman named Dorothy Chen, Vance continued, the room falling completely silent. Dorothy is a retired elementary school teacher living in Sacramento. She spent 34 years of her life teaching 3rd grade to California's children. She formally retired in 2021. Today, her CalSTRS state pension pays her $3,400 a month. Her modest apartment rent is $1,900 a month. That means 56% of her fixed income vanishes the moment she receives it. Her entire life savings amounts to exactly $87,000. Dorothy Chen is what economic policy researchers clinically define as being one emergency away. A major car transmission repair, an unexpected hospital bill, a sudden landlord rent increase, any one of those standard life events occurs, and Dorothy is out on the street. $37 billion of taxpayer wealth was explicitly spent under the promise of keeping hardworking people exactly like Dorothy off the concrete. Yet, Dorothy has not received a single solitary dollar of that relief. And the 187,000 people who were desperately supposed to be saved by that astronomical sum are still sleeping outside in the elements. Sensing the narrative slipping from his grasp, Newsom physically leaned into his podium microphone. The trademark charm was still visibly present. It was dimmed, certainly, but still fully operational, functioning in the way a sophisticated dimmer switch reduces the glaring light without ever actually turning it off. Vice President Newsom began, projecting a deeply practiced tone of solemn executive gravity. What we are discussing here is a profound national crisis that demands a coordinated, comprehensive national response. The reality is that California receives a vastly disproportionate share of the entire nation's homeless population, roughly 30%, primarily because of our temperate, forgiving coastal climate and our robust, compassionate network of social services. The fundamental challenge we face is not a lack of financial investment. The challenge is the complex implementation at the granular local level, where diverse cities and individual counties, Vance did not yell, but his interjection sliced through Newsom's political filibuster with the cold efficiency of a scalpel. Governor Vance interrupted. You are the chief executive governor of the state. You personally signed the massive budgets. You authorized the allocation of that $37 billion. Your very own appointed state auditor publicly reports that your very own oversight council has completely failed to track spending or evaluate program effectiveness since June of 2021. This is not a microscopic city problem. This is not an isolated county problem. The truth is, you did not know where the billions of dollars were going because you simply did not care to look. For the first time in the evening, the armor cracked. Newsom's jaw tightened. The involuntary physical gesture lasted for less than a second, a minute microspasm of the masseter muscle, completely invisible to the naked eye of anyone sitting in the back rows of the theater. But it was perfectly, devastatingly visible to the 14 high-definition broadcast cameras transmitting the feed to 9 million glaring screens across the Republic. It was the very first piece of physical, undeniable evidence that Gavin Newsom's legendary charm offensive had finally encountered a solid object it could not simply charm its way out of. Smelling blood in the water, Vance relentlessly advanced, pushing 3 distinct, damning quotes onto the massive screen behind him. It was a timeline of political failure, same man, same subject, 3 timestamps, spanning a staggering 22 years of public life. First, a quote from 2004, when Newsom was the mayor of San Francisco. "We will end homelessness in San Francisco within 10 years. Vance read the quote, then read the results directly from the ledger. San Francisco homeless population, 5,550 inches, 2005. Today, in 2024, it is 8,323, an absolute increase of 50%. He moved to the second quote from Newsom's 2020 State of the State address as governor. "I know homelessness can be solved. This is our cause. This is our calling." The result? California homeless population, 150. 1,000 inches, 2019. 187,000 inches, 2024. An increase of 24%. Finally, the third quote, delivered with the heavy finality of a judge reading a verdict. May 2021, Governor of California. "We will end family homelessness within 5 years." Vance paused, letting the date hang. The deadline for that promise was the 11th of May 2026. That deadline passed exactly 6 weeks ago. Family homelessness in the state of California has absolutely not ended. He didn't stop there. He grounded the statistics in agonizing reality. Michaela Williams is 4 years old. In March of this very year, she was photographed by a local journalist sleeping on a freezing wooden park bench in Sacramento, clutching a plastic grocery bag full of toys, simply because her working parents have no home. She is the face of one of the thousands of families that were supposed to be rescued by a solemn promise the governor made on national television 5 years ago. J.D. Vance did not editorialize. He did not raise his voice to shout over his opponent. He merely read the politician's own quotes, read the devastating historical results, and looked at Gavin Newsom with the hollow, unyielding gaze of a senior auditor looking at a catastrophic corporate ledger that fundamentally refuses to balance. He looked at him without overt anger, without the gloating triumph of a partisan hack, but with a particular terrifying patience of a man who intrinsically knows that cold, hard numbers do not require any passionate advocacy to destroy a career. 3 massive promises, spanning 3 long decades, Vance summarized, his tone dropping an octave. The exact same problem, the exact same catastrophic result. And each and every time, the political promise got bigger, the taxpayer spending got astronomically bigger, and the human outcome got objectively worse. At what point, Governor, do we admit that this is no longer a funding problem, but a catastrophic failure of leadership? Newsom instantly pivoted desperately reaching for the big picture macro defense, the exact same rhetorical shield that had successfully deflected every debate attack and navigated every hostile media interview for the last 7 years. Vice President, homelessness is a deeply entrenched national crisis driven by complex macroeconomic housing costs and systemic national mental health failures, and Vance cut him off again. Texas has a temperate climate. Florida has a temperate climate. Yet neither of those massive states has 187,000 citizens living in squalor on their streets. The difference is not the weather, Governor. The difference is executive management. The sentence was 7 words shorter than Newsom's elaborate pivot, but it landed with 7 times the concussive force in the auditorium. Up in the gallery, a middle-aged woman wearing a Sacramento City employee lanyard, a woman who had driven 2 hours expecting to loudly cheer for the progressive governor she had enthusiastically voted for twice, physically shifted uncomfortably in her seat, lowered her hands, and pointedly did not clap. Vance's voice changed again. The flat, unyielding Ohio cadence receded slightly. What replaced it was something far quieter, far more dangerous. It was not partisan anger, nor was it dripping contempt, but rather a kind of bewildered, clinical precision. It was the exact tone of a man who has stumbled upon something so glaringly horrific in the financial books that he keeps compulsively rechecking the math because it cannot possibly be correct. In the year 2024, Vance began, leaning slightly forward, a California assemblyman named Josh Hoover introduced Assembly Bill 293. The legislation was incredibly simple, standard good governance policy. It legally required state agencies that administer these massive homelessness programs to file routine annual reports detailing their spending and their outcomes. How much taxpayer money was spent, exactly what it was spent on, and whether the intervention actually worked. It was a bipartisan effort. The bill overwhelmingly passed both chambers of your own state legislature. Vance paused, and you, the governor, vetoed it. He let the silence stretch, a longer, more agonizing pause. Slowly, deliberately, Vance closed the lid of his laptop. He didn't close it because he was finished speaking. He closed it because the very next sentence he was going to deliver did not require the visual aid of a screen. It required only his voice in a room full of American citizens capable of doing basic arithmetic. You spent $37 billion without tracking where a single dime went. Your own internal auditor explicitly warned you that you were flying blind. A legislator drafted a common sense law that would forcefully mandate you to track the money. And you took your pen and you vetoed the law. Why in God's name would a man who just spent $37 billion veto a law that simply required him to show the public where it went? He opened the laptop again, the screen illuminating his face. I can logically think of only 2 possible reasons. Number 1, you actually do know exactly where the money went, and you are terrified to let anyone see the corruption. Or number 2, you genuinely have no idea where the billions went, and you are desperate to ensure nobody finds out that you don't know. I am genuinely struggling to figure out which of those 2 realities is worse for the country. It was at this precise, devastating moment that Gavin Newsom reached for his water glass. The physical reach was deeply controlled. Newsom's movements are always controlled. His gestures perpetually calibrated by focus groups, his physical body always performing the highly optimized version of itself that traditionally polls best with suburban demographics. But the reach was glaringly premature. He had not been speaking for several minutes. His throat was not dry. He was not physically thirsty. The reach was the desperate, involuntary movement of a man whose brain is screaming at his hands to do something, anything, because the terrifying alternative is letting them sit perfectly still on the podium. And sitting perfectly still while under the unforgiving scrutiny of 14 broadcast cameras looks exactly like what it truly is, the total, humiliating absence of an answer. Vance reopened the laptop completely, his voice shifting yet again. It was lower now, significantly slower, carrying a heavy timbre that wasn't quite genuine sadness, but existed adjacent to it. It was the resonant, unmistakable tone of a man who grew up in a place where money disappeared and nobody came to find it. Let us look at November of 2020, Vance intoned, transporting the room back to the darkest days of the pandemic. The state of California is in a brutal lockdown. Small restaurants are forcibly closed by your executive mandate. Family businesses are shuttered permanently. Hardworking citizens are losing their jobs, they are losing their homes, and their children are locked out of schools. And you, the governor, the very man who signed the draconian shutdown orders under the guise of public safety, is photographed eating a lavish indoor dinner at the French Laundry restaurant in Napa Valley. $350 per plate. No social distancing, no mask, surrounded by corporate lobbyists. He did not dwell on the visceral hypocrisy. He didn't need to. He moved swiftly to the next catastrophic number, possessing the clinical detachment of a trauma surgeon, moving to the next necessary bloody incision, precise, required, and entirely without pleasure. The governor's personal residence in Fair Oaks is currently valued at $3.7 million. His Plumpjack Winery and Hospitality Empire's total valuation is conveniently not publicly disclosed, but for a premier Napa Valley winery operating for 3 decades, one can easily estimate the massive wealth. Dorothy Chen, our retired teacher, pays 56% of her fixed income just to keep a roof over her head. $37 billion was spent by your administration, enough capital to buy a permanent house for every single homeless person in the state. Instead, the crisis increased by 44%. Dorothy is still living exactly one minor emergency away from the gutter. And the governor, the man responsible for it all, ate a $350 dinner at the French Laundry, retreated to his $7 million estate, and boldly declared to the press, and I am quoting you directly here, "Sir, I'm not interested anymore in funding failure." He is not interested in funding failure. He spent $37 billion systematically creating it. Then he unilaterally cut the oversight budget to zero and aggressively blamed the local city mayors for the fallout. That is not executive leadership, Governor. That is the very definition of abandonment. Newsom fought back. He fought back the only way Gavin Newsom fundamentally knows how to fight, with explosive energy, with grand, sweeping physical motion, and with the overwhelming, forceful volume of a man who has spent his entire existence being the tallest, loudest, most affluent person in every room he had ever entered. He had long ago learned to weaponize his height, his vocal velocity, and his sheer presence as blunt instruments of political persuasion. He stood entirely erect, projecting his voice to the rafters. "Vice President, let me tell you exactly what we built in California. Project Home Key. We aggressively converted dilapidated motels and empty hotels into permanent, life-saving housing." The state auditor, the exact same auditor you continuously quote to attack me explicitly, stated that our program was 2.5 times cheaper than ground-up new construction. We successfully housed 16,000 vulnerable people through that one initiative alone, the CARE Act. We are actively getting citizens suffering from severe mental illness off the dangerous streets and into mandatory, compassionate treatment, the Encampment Resolution Fund. We have successfully cleared over 11,000 squalid encampment sites and moved those suffering people indoors. His voice rose sharply, finally locating its signature rhythm. The unmistakable California rhythm. The Newsom cadence It was the rapid-fire delivery of a man who deeply believes that if you aggressively name enough government programs in rapid succession, the mere act of naming them magically constitutes a tangible result. We are the only state in this entire union that has actually built comprehensive solutions at scale. Name one single state that has done more. Name one. The gallery stirred uncomfortably. A low murmur of tentative support rippled through the partisan sections of the audience, thin, uncertain, and deeply fragile. It was the desperate sound of an electorate that desperately wants to believe the polished rhetoric, but has just been confronted with 37 billion empirical reasons to deeply doubt it. Vance did not interrupt the tirade. He waited patiently for the echo of Newsom's shouting to die in the cavernous room. Then he struck the final, fatal blow. The governor just loudly bragged that he built solutions at scale, Vance noted softly. I genuinely want to talk to the American people about his concept of scale. He publicly promised to build 3.5 million new homes in California by the year 2025. He actually built exactly 640,000. That is a dismal 18% of his own stated target. He later tried to spin it to the press, calling it a mere stretch goal. Building 640,000 out of a promised 3.5 million is not missing a stretch goal, Governor. That is delivering exactly 18 cents on a promised dollar. He proudly talks about leading where Washington failed. But I am an auditor, and I look strictly at tangible results, not empty words. I look at your results, and what I see is a tragedy of evaporation. I see $37 billion of taxpayer money that simply vanished into thin air. I see 3.5 million desperately needed homes that completely vanished. I see a solemn deadline to end family homelessness that vanished. I see a bipartisan demand for basic financial accountability that vanished because you vetoed it with a stroke of your pen. Vance paused, delivering the kill shot with chilling calmness. Everything you touch vanishes, Governor. The taxpayer money vanishes. The affordable houses vanish. The grand political promises vanish. The only thing that absolutely does not vanish is the 187,000 broken human beings living on your streets. They are still out there every single morning, sleeping in nylon tents under concrete overpasses, in front of every hardworking Californian who drives to their job and is forced to pretend not to see them. And now you want to take this catastrophic record and do this to the entire country. Vance turned his gaze directly into the primary broadcast camera, bypassing Newsom entirely. I would ask the American people one very simple question tonight. When everything this man touches in California vanishes into ruin, do you really want him to touch America? Gavin Newsom's desperate barrage of bureaucratic acronyms couldn't mask the catastrophic reality. $37 billion had vanished without a single verifiable result. With a definitive click of his laptop, J.D. Vance sealed the governor's fate, triggering an apocalyptic fallout that sent billionaire donors into a panic and birthed two viral kill shot clips that fundamentally shattered Newsom's 2028 presidential dreams. Forced into a humiliating media surrender and a quiet, defeated signing of the very accountability bill he once arrogantly vetoed, Newsom thought the worst of the political bleeding was finally over. But as the ink dried in Sacramento, a chilling alert lit up his campaign manager's phone, revealing a newly encrypted Republican super PAC domain, the CaliforniaLedger.com, proving that the devastating $37 billion audit wasn't the end of Vance's political massacre. It was merely the terrifying prologue to what happens next.